The humble doorbell. I know that people don't use these anymore because you now have to announce your presence at someone's house using a text message. But I still have a doorbell, and it works. And in fact, this is a trick doorbell. And that's because when I ring it, recognize that sound? I'll bet some of you do, because you probably have that as a text message notification. So this is the story about how I got the Jetsons doorbell to be my doorbell. Now, followers of my channel for years will remember that I did a whole series on my doorbell server, that's right, server, and its refurbishment, soup to nuts, top to bottom, and got everything up and running with that, all stemming from an idea that I got many, many years ago. You will notice that the Enginola speaker used to say Motorola, but the plastic had yellowed, so I spray painted it, and I just put a P-Touch label on there just to make it funny, and that way it looks somewhat reasonable. There is a doorbell chime right below that, and that indeed does work as well, but only under certain circumstances. So let me tell you how I did this in the first place, and then we'll get into that, and of course I'll demonstrate the plain old ding-dong doorbell. Of course, the first thing you want to know about is the equipment, which is what you see right here, smack dab in the middle of your screen. It's an ancient, old Dell PC, same type that anybody could buy back in maybe 1997 or 1998, something like that. That's all it is. It's got a Pentium 2 processor in it, I think 333 megahertz, 200 and something megabytes of RAM, 320, I can't remember anymore, something like that, and it runs Windows XP. You hear music, and you heard that upstairs coming out of that Enginola speaker, because that's yet another thing that this does, in addition to yet more stuff. There's a lot more than meets the eye here, but let's tell the story first of how this came to be. I'll show you the screen. Let me just move my tripod up here. Just a plain old Windows XP desktop there with a couple of programs running, and they're off-the-shelf stuff. There's no special software or anything required. There is some trick hardware, however. So this harks back to, we're going to say, a good 2004 to 5, somewhere in there. Yeah, maybe pushing 2005. The wife and I had an apartment, and it was a random day. I don't remember what day it was, what was going on that day. I don't know. And I'm sitting there with the remote, and I'm channel surfing, and I'm channel surfing, and I'm channel surfing. There's nothing on TV. Nothing. And remember, that was, at this point, 18 years ago, and there still was nothing on TV even then. So it's only gotten worse since. Anyways, I'm flipping through the channels, and one thing that came on that sparked my interest for no apparent reason other than I hadn't seen it in forever was I stumbled across Cartoon Network, and an episode of The Jetsons was on. And I just start watching that episode for nothing better to do, and their doorbell rang. And that was the exact sound that you heard. So anyway, the show goes on, another minute or so goes by, and I'm sitting there and I'm saying, huh, their doorbell rang. Now, we were in the process of looking for a house, and we had found this one, and I said, huh, their doorbell rang. Oh, that's funny, you know. I don't seem to remember there being a doorbell button on the house. Well, I guess that's just another thing that I'll have to put on the list. So I put it on the list, but fortunately I remembered it. A few days, a week, month later, I don't remember. Talking with the wife over the dinner table, and I'm saying, you know, I don't think that house has a doorbell. She's like, well, we'll put one in. It's not a big deal. I said, yeah, it's not a big deal. I get that. I know that. But I was watching the Jetsons and their doorbell rang, and I said, how cool would it be for my doorbell to be the Jetsons' doorbell? That would be absolutely awesome. So the preliminaries were easy. I went on the interwebs, and even back in 2005, I found that soundbite right there. So yeah, it's been around for a while. I found that soundbite, and I said, good, okay, so now I have the file. I need something to play it. So I'm thinking of all sorts of different ideas. I was thinking one of those like greeting cards that you open up and plays music. I thought maybe with a better speaker hookup, something that might work into an amplifier kind of thing. Really basic stuff. One that you could put your, like record your own message into. And I'm saying, now they're probably constructed so cheaply, there's no way that's going to work. And I'm just toying over the ideas. And I said, well, I got a bunch of old PCs laying around. I'm sure that one of those would play a simple WAV file or even MP3. So I said, all right, well, I got that. So I had an old system, and I put the soundbite on there, and I used Winamp because that's what I've been using forever. And indeed, it plays that sound clip just fine, as you would expect. And it goes out the computer speakers, and that's it. No big deal. All right. So the next question is, how do I get a doorbell button to interface with the computer? That's a great question, and I didn't have the answer. I did some research, and I did find that there are keyboard shortcuts for Winamp that you can press keys on the keyboard and it'll make it play the open file. So I said, great, all I need is a PC on, running, with Winamp loaded, and that file loaded into Winamp, and then through the keys on there, it was the X key on the keyboard, and that would play the sound file. Great. Now, how do I get a doorbell button to make this work? I thought of a bunch of different ideas, and one idea, I have a keyboard right here, one idea was to just get a regular plain old everyday keyboard. This happens to be a Model M, and I would get a junker of some kind, and I'd make some sort of metal bracket to mount to the base of it here with a solenoid that would poke the X key. And using the appropriate solenoid and power supply and all that stuff, I should be able to make that work. And I'm thinking about it, and I said, nah, that's hokey. That's too mechanical. Could it work? Absolutely. Would it work? Definitely. Would it work reliably for pretty much ever with the amount of usage? Absolutely. But I said, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way to do it. There's got to be a way. So I said, well, yeah, the keyboard's got all kinds of keys on it. And I know that there's only 6 wires coming out of a PS2 style keyboard, because that's what was prevalent at the time. And I knew that in the keyboard is a keyboard controller, and that maps out which key was pressed and then sends the appropriate scan code to the system to make the system know what key was pressed over only those 6 wires. So I said, well, that should be some sort of matrix inside. And I took an old junker keyboard and I opened it up. And lo and behold, and you can't really do this today because of how crappy keyboards are made, but this one that I opened up indeed had a circuit board with the controller chip on it, and the Mylar sheets, because it's a plain old rubber dome keyboard, had traces that went through the whole thing and went up and connected into this board. And there was a bank of, I don't know, what do we have, 10, 12, 15, 18 by 6, something like that, whatever how many keys going across there is. So I said, well, this is a simple matrix. The 6 refer to the 6 rows of keys on a standard keyboard, and the 18 or so, however many it is, refer to the individual keys. I said, so all I have to do is trace this back And there you go. So I got an even yet older, junkier system that I just needed to boot up just to have a cursor on the screen. Because if I blew something up, chances are good it would blow up the keyboard, but it wouldn't blow up the system. But even so, if it was going to blow up the system, it might as well be a piece of crap. So that's what I did. I got a system there. And using some alligator clip wires, I traced that, and I held on to the one on the, I guess, the 5th pin. And then 1, 2, 3, and an X showed up on the screen. And that's all it took. With that, I soldered a pair of wires onto those 2 pins on the board and ran that wire out of the keyboard. So now it plugs in with its regular PS2 connection. As you know, the keyboard itself, as it is still fully functional as it would be. But there's an extra pair of wires that, when shorted, would elicit an X on the system to play the sound bite. Well, it went a little further than that, because it didn't disable anything on the keyboard. So the keyboard still worked, and that was that. And I said, well, I could get a simple doorbell push button, and when you press it, it would do the X and play the sound bite, and that was that. I said, but I want a lighted doorbell button. Now, you're not going to see anything during the day because it's too light out to see that. Plus, there's a little hidden something in there as well. I was talking to the whiff over the dinner table, and I said, all right, I got all this much figured out. I said, but I want a lighted doorbell button. Now, the whiff knows nothing about electricity and how any of this stuff works. She just knows from what she has seen me play with over the years, and she said, I don't know, use a relay or something. And I'm saying to myself, a relay? That'll never work. A relay? Come on. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. A relay? Huh. I said, do me a favor. Get me a piece of paper and a pencil and leave me be. And I sat down and I drew up a circuit diagram. And I'm going to show that to you in a little bit. Anyway, I said, okay, now I'm all set. This on paper looks like it will work. I should be able to do this. There's got to be a way. So I'm going to find it. I went to Home Depot or what have you, and I bought a lighted doorbell button. Just plain off-the-shelf lighted doorbell button, because that is the one piece I didn't have. I had a 12-volt power supply, which would be using the 12 volts in a standard computer, but this is all just test work. And a bunch of relays that would normally be used for add-on stuff, like in a car. If you add fog lights to your car or something like that, maybe you're a racer or some crap like that, and you hook up different whatevers and things. And you got that zombie lights button, and, and all that kind of crazy shit like that. I said, there we go. So anyway, I got it, and I hooked all of this up. The problem was, the way a lighted doorbell button works in a standard doorbell system is it passes the current through the bell, or to the bell, through the actual bulb in the button itself, which in them days were incandescent. They probably might still be, but everybody's got camera doorbells now. Anyways, mine was the OG doorbell, the original gangster. Anyways, it passes the full current through that, and because the current draw of the bulb is less than that of the doorbell solenoid itself, the light in the button will light up. And if you've ever operated such a button, which I'm sure you have at one point or another, when you press said doorbell button when it's dark out, you'll notice that when it makes and the doorbell actually rings, that light goes out because you're now putting a dead short across that. It just so happened to work out in the same fashion with the coil of the relay. Let me show you the relay. I keep these on my key ring. There's a whole bunch of them. This is a standard Bosch type relay. This is Accu brand. I don't know. It's just something. You'll notice there's a bunch of pins on there. And it's actually very simple. We'll turn it this way. What you have here are the coil connections. So in line with this is the doorbell button, the lighted doorbell button. And the current draw of the bulb is less than that of the current capacity of the coil in the relay. And that's how I made it light up. So what happens when you press the button is 12 volts is fed to this relay that picks the contacts and shorts the contact over here to, I forget which one is which, but it's on the diagram, to the 87 contact, which is this one over here. So when you apply power here, it shorts these together. And all I have to do to get an X on the system to play that is to hook those wires from that keyboard up right to these terminals. And that's exactly what I did. So you see that white wire and that stuff right there. There's actually a total of 3 relays that are there, as a matter of fact. And that is how I tied into the existing, or the not yet existing, but will be existing, standard doorbell. And there is a regular old doorbell transformer. The white thing is a little motion sensor light that the batteries are dead and corroded in, and I don't care about it anymore. I just got to take it down and throw it out. But there's the doorbell transformer. That was here, and in fact, you can see the wire on it. I don't know if you can tell on camera, because the batteries in this thing are going steadily deader and deader, but that is a cloth-covered wire. Original to this house from 1954. The wires existed, but the doorbell chime itself and the button outside no longer did. I imagine that when they had the house re-sided in the early 2000s, I'm guessing, or maybe late 90s, they said, the hell with it, or we'll put it in later, or I don't know, or anything like that. And that was that. There actually is yet another piece of the puzzle here, and that is a doorbell buzzer, probably installed sometime in the 1960s, although I am not certain on that. All I know is that this basement here was quote-unquote finished in the 1960s sometime, and they probably said we should put a doorbell down here or some chime of some kind. That's a doorbell buzzer, which is what they decided to go with, and there it is. So I made sure that that was hooked up in tandem with the actual chime. But getting back to the more digital and electronical side of things, this is the keyboard, an old Compaq branded keyboard that happens to have multimedia buttons that don't matter. And if you look down over here, this wire, this white wire, has a wire kind of wrapped around it. That is the pair of wires that is connected to the X key on this keyboard. And indeed, if I press the X key, it rings the doorbell. And if I do it again, you can see Winamp in the center there play it. Well, it all worked great, and the button was lighted, but because standard doorbell systems in homes work at 18 volts AC, and what I have available in a system is 12 volts DC, that light still lights up, but a lot dimmer, which is good for an incandescent bulb because it'll last longer. It hasn't burned out yet, and it's been now 17, 18 years, something like that. Still working great. So if it does burn out, I just need to replace the button itself, but running it at that lower voltage, I mean, they can last a good 20 years as it is. But there's that. But then, of course, you have another problem, which is when somebody presses the button, sometimes they jam it a couple times, or maybe the button can get stuck. Mine doesn't, but I've seen it. So what happens if you press the X key repeatedly, and let me just move you down over here, so you'll see that the first time you press it, it rings, but I can press it all day. It won't ring again. But if I wait a few seconds, then it works again. That actually was done straight through Windows. Again, there's no trick software required. It's all within the keyboard settings in Control Panel. So now you're saying, well, what about the regular doorbell? How does that work? Well, I'm not a programmer per se, and I really don't know how to control any of that kind of stuff and make a connection out of the serial port, actuate another relay, or anything like that. I could do it with a simple manual switch, which would work also, but the way it works is it's a simple shunt that if that system goes dead, now goes dead means powers off completely, not crashes and is sitting there with a blue screen, in which case I'm screwed because they could ring the doorbell all day and it ain't going to do anything. You'll hear the relay down here click, but that's about it. And I'll demonstrate that to you in just a moment. But the way it works is a simple shunt, where if that system loses power, like the power supply goes dead, or there's a power outage and the system is set to stay off after an outage, then it shunts back to the original doorbell, which was not really original except for that buzzer I just showed you, the Chime I bought at Home Depot. That's really all it was, and the way I did that was using two other relays, because that uses AC, so either or could be powered or a common at one time. So I figured if I used one relay for each, then that way it would cut both wires and then allow the Jetsons doorbell to work. So it's a shunt like that using two more of those relays. So what happens is when that computer is powered on, two relays up in the ceiling there where I showed you already pick and stay picked the entire time. And they've been on, selected, and running, so to speak, for like 17 or 18 years now without any trouble. They can do that. They're designed for that. Could they fail at some point? Yeah. Could bad things happen? Yeah, they could. It just is. I'll deal with it when that happens, but it hasn't yet, and I don't expect it to anytime soon. And probably if one fails, the other will still be okay. Maybe. I don't know. But anyway, it just shunts it over completely and allows the other relay to work. How it's wired up, well, let's go into the actual diagram right here. I do not know how to draw a circuit diagram, so I'm going to show that to you, and I'll give you kind of a voice synopsis of what's actually going on. So I'll read you what it says at the top. It says, theory, with power off, existing doorbell circuit is maintained through normally closed and common terminals of relays 1 and 2. When relays are energized, normally open and common terminals short, disconnecting switch doorbell button from existing circuit and connecting switch to third relay. This allows 12 volts through switch to remain lighted but will not pick relay 3 until closed. When relay 3 is closed, normally open and common terminals will short, shorting contacts on the keyboard, allowing character to be generated. Server will play soundbite. So what you see at the very top here is the original doorbell transformer and how it is connected. So you can see the doorbell on the right side and the doorbell button, and these wires just pass right through. So you can see if you go from the right terminal of the doorbell transformer to the button with a bulb in there, it will light the filament in that bulb, continue on down that into the doorbell itself through the solenoid in there, and then back over to the left terminal on the original doorbell transformer. Then we get into the other relays, which is down below. So from the doorbell button, you can see the relay is powered from plus 12 volts in the doorbell server. There's a pair of wires like that. And what that does is allows the doorbell button to control the relay that's shown a little bit lower on the right instead of the existing doorbell. As you see in the center terminals, which are the normally closed terminals, that goes to the existing doorbell. So that way, if the relays are not picked, then what happens is it goes back and defaults to the regular doorbell. Otherwise, it shunts over, so the doorbell button controls the other relay, which is on the right. So you have plus 12 volts from the server going to the lighted doorbell button, through that and out to the coil of the relay. The coil of the relay is now acting as the solenoid coil in the original ding-dong doorbell like that. And then the two wires, top and bottom, on that go back to the keyboard, which generate an X and causes the server to play the soundbite. Now I'll let you hear the relays operate. We're going to start with just the actual doorbell button itself to make the Jetsons doorbell work. I know you can't really see anything, but what you need to do is hear it. So what I'm going to do is ring the doorbell several times in succession, and you'll hear the relay click on and off. I can even hold it for a moment, and it'll stay picked until I let go, but yet the system only plays the soundbite once. And if they try to ring it again too soon, like a second later, it won't go. They have to wait, which is a feature I like. So let me run upstairs and run that for you. You will hear, of course, the Jetsons doorbell operate a few times during that. So I could barely hear it upstairs, so I don't know exactly what you might have heard or anything like that. But I think it like double clicked at one point, which is fine because, again, the software in Windows does that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and power that system down. I'm just going to hard power it down because it's the same difference. And then with it off, I'll let you hear the regular doorbell. And then we'll go from there. And that's all there is to it. With that powered down, it's now on the regular doorbell. So let's go do that now. So here it is. There's no music because that system is off. And now if I ring the doorbell, yeah, kind of fail. You might hear the buzzer downstairs. Now let me go downstairs and let you hear the buzzer. So that's all there is to it. And now we'll go back to the relays and I'll power the system back on. The system will now boot up normally and will automatically launch Winamp and sit there with that loaded. It also does other stuff because a lot of you have probably already commented 12 times about that's such a waste of electricity. Well, you charge your phone every day. How about your electric vehicle? Ever see what your electric bill has been since that? Maybe an electric dryer, electric stove? They're so concerned about us conserving water and conserving everything else, but they don't use as much electricity as you want. They're going to force electric cars on us, so we're going to be using that. We're going to be using plenty of electricity. They don't care about that for right now. Eventually, that's going to have a crackdown as well. They kind of only care about that in the summer when everybody's running their AC. And then we have rolling blackouts and stuff like that. But otherwise, I already tested this. I've had videos on refurbishing the whole system. And it typically runs at somewhere around 50 watts. And it's not sitting there idle waiting for some random person to ring my doorbell. Oh, no, it's doing a lot more while that's happening in that same 50 watts. And that's because in addition to it being an electronic programmable door chime, it is also an electronic programmable telephone ringer. You heard the Windows XP startup sound. And it's also a background music player, and as soon as that loads up, that will play that music which connects to my Shoutcast server and plays music throughout the house at that rather low volume all day and all night. And no, I don't hear it when I sleep because there are no speakers in the bedroom, and it's a very low level. So there's always just some background music playing, kind of like when you go into a store. In addition to all of that, this blue thing here with flash drives plugged into it are digital photos that I've resized, and various other computers in the house can read those over the network through this system, and it acts as a server for digital pictures as well. So it does a heck of a lot more than all of that. And this thing is so decked out with state-of-the-art technology, or technology. It's not only got a CD reader drive in it, CD, but it's got a floppy drive. You don't see those anymore. It's got a 5¼ floppy drive. You definitely don't see that anymore. And it has a Zip 100 iOmega zip drive as well. And if I wanted to, I could even plug in, I have a 250 megabyte external one, and that way I can copy 5¼ discs to a Zip 250 disc, or better yet, copy from a Zip 250 disc back to a 5¼ floppy. Wouldn't that be awesome? So the functionality is there. Of course, that's little used, but yeah, and I never made a label for the digital picture server function. Just never thought to do that. But yeah, that's what it all does. And it is actually in the process of still booting up and has just loaded. And it'll be slow, but if I hit X, there he goes. It works. Now, let me call the phone. So now everything is up and running. I get email notifications through it as well, which is what that was. It's right in between songs now. There you go. Now you hear music. I'll call the house. There may be a short delay for the first ring, because that system is pretty slow. So I had to block out the speaking caller ID through the Amazon Echoes throughout the house because they echo. But you definitely did hear the ringer, and that was from a Geico commercial years ago.
Hey, those gecko ringtones you put on our website are wonderful. People love them.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Turned out nice.
Got another one for you.
At Geico.com, it's easy to get a free rate quote, manage your policy, make payments, or even file a claim.
Now that's a ringtone.
Yeah, it's interesting. Certainly not the worst ringtone I've ever heard. Yeah, that might be the worst.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Yeah, you can find these sound bites out there as well. They're there for you. But that's what I chose because it was hilarious at the time, and the commercial is still pretty funny today. So that's the story of how my humble doorbell plays the Jetsons doorbell. Again, there's going to be naysayers out there saying it's still way too much power. You can do the same with a Raspberry Pi. No, you can't, because there's even more than meets the eye. There's an old Sound Blaster card in this system, which is why I used an old system, one of the reasons why, that is ISA, and it has a built-in amplifier to hit the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 speakers throughout the house, I think. Yeah, so to do all of that, I would need a separate amplifier, and that's going to use yet more wattage, and you're going to end up at about the same. The monitor stays off all the time because nobody's looking at it, nobody needs to. And that's really the whole story. That's the whole thing, how I did it, with a couple dollars in parts. Ran 12 volts from the system to those relays, so it'll shunt between the house doorbell, regular ding-dong doorbell, and this, and which I had on hand already. I had to buy the doorbell button, but I had to buy it anyway. An old keyboard I had laying around, wire I got tons of laying around, and some ingenuity, and there you go. So yeah, you too can do this if you're so inclined. This was done during my creative years, and recreating it, well, the groundwork, the framework is in place. So if I ever needed a different system, it could be resurrected as such, but I can probably keep this going for 30, 50 more years. I don't know, whatever it's going to last. It's going to be a long time running yet. It's been doing well. If you haven't seen the refurbishment series on this system, there's going to be tons of links in the video description. With that, I thank you very kindly for watching this very long, drawn-out, and long-winded video on how I got my doorbell to play the Jetsons doorbell. I appreciate your watching. Make sure you click like, make sure you click subscribe, and take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.